Welcome to the chosen ones. God does not test you when you are ready. He tests you to see whether you are willing to hear the type of truth that most people only learn after they have bled secretly for years, wondering if God forgot their address. Chosen ones, lean in. What if I told you that while you were weeping yourself to sleep, losing friends, being forgotten, and feeling like a divine mistake, you were taking the most crucial test of your life? And test so secret that you didn't realize you were taking it. That seems ridiculous, doesn't it? But here's a stark truth. Heaven does not provide you a study guide. It sends storms. And if you got it through without becoming bitter, shattered, or a phony version of yourself, you passed. Let me phrase it like this. While others prayed for open doors, you were being watched in a dark corridor, not to punish, but to prove yourself. God didn't ignore you. He was inspecting you. No, not with a clipboard and a chorus of angels. Consider survival-level treachery, delayed blessings, and Wi-Fi-enabled foes. And you did not just survive. You maintained your spirit pure in a contaminated system. You passed what? Most folks failed. But here's the plot twist. The true prize does not occur when you pass. It occurs when you understand why you have to be tried in quiet. Because what comes next is loud, life-changing, and locked for everyone who cheated. So take a seat. Stay with me. Because at the conclusion of this film, you will have more than simply an understanding of what you went through. You'll see why you had to pass in secret before God could advance you in public. Let's get to it. For starters, your character was considered more important than your qualifications. You were judged silently. You were never assessed on your abilities, appearance, following, or CV. You were being evaluated based on your character rather than your weight or accomplishments. And here's what most folks miss. The exam was not loud. It did not come with a warning. It happened gradually, via seemingly little instances of being missed, lied to, and betrayed by the same people you would have gone to battle for. And God didn't come to your rescue every time because He didn't want to safeguard your comfort. He was attempting to prove your core. People love to brag about the highlights, but paradise is watching what you do when no one is applauding, no one is assisting, when the lights are turned out, and your heart is wounded, but you still choose to do the right thing. That's how you were promoted. You did not pass due to your expertise. You passed because you chose honesty over retaliation or giving up. You had every reason to be cold, selfish, and harsh, but you didn't. That mute constraint was louder than 1,000 prayers. Don't get it twisted. God saw everything. You were tried in silence because it had to be authentic. It needed to be honest. It needed to be raw. And God wanted to see who you were once the applause ended. When possibilities dried up. When the individuals you trusted turned out to be evidence that love lies. And you stood tall in spirit, even when your knees were collapsing. That's what sets you distinct. The fact that this exam did not seem to be a test contributed to its difficulty. It seemed like life was unjust. It seemed like betrayal, a lack of sickness, and disappointment. However, what was truly occurring was divine observation. God was assessing the substance of your spirit, not how you behaved when things were going well, but how you moved when everything said God had forgotten you and you refused to give up. That's why these doors are set to swing open. They weren't searching for the most skilled. They were searching for the most genuine. And having discovered it in you while no one else was looking but God. Number 2, you were unaware you were taking an exam since the examination was supposed to be felt rather than proclaimed. You weren't aware you were being tested. And that is just how it had to be. If God had warned you ahead of time that this is a divine test, you would have prepared yourself, prayed harder, put on your best behavior, and made every effort to impress. But it wasn't about performance. It was about the truth. The exam was intended to feel like chaos, bewilderment, and stillness, rather than a scheduled course. It must have seemed like life was falling apart, and prayers were being unanswered. Like doors slamming in your face, or individuals you trusted abruptly turning on you. Why? Because it is where your true character emerges. God does not desire your scripted righteousness or surface-level patience. He was curious to see what you would do when life put a strain on you. Anger, disappointment, and uncertainty. Yes, even these were part of the exam. And no, He wasn't seeking perfection. He was looking for authenticity. Were you authentic enough to scream out in anguish while not cursing your purpose? Were you broken yet still loyal? Did you want to give up but choose to creep ahead anyway? You assumed you were being punished or disregarded. That was part of the examination, because the only way to demonstrate trust is to continue going even when nothing makes sense. The only way to demonstrate strength is to remain compassionate while cruelty surrounds you. God had to test you in a manner that did not like a test, since the purpose was not just to pass. It was meant to show your true self. This was not a classroom with a pop quiz. This was your ordinary existence, including your money, health, relationships, and mental struggles. And that's what made it so compelling. You didn't know you were being monitored in the spirit world. Angels were taking notes as you struggled to get out of bed. You were rating yourself based on how fatigued you felt. However, heaven was assessing you based on your continued attendance. So you passed, not because you smiled through it all, but because you refused to allow the fire transform you into someone you weren't destined to be. You remained faithful in a scenario meant to break you. That was the examination. You aced it without even realizing you were in the room. Number 3, you were tempted to abandon your spiritual DNA, but you refused. The exam was never on obvious topics. It didn't matter how powerful you appeared, how eloquently you recited scripture, or how long you could fast. The actual test was deeper. It was about whether you would surrender your spiritual DNA in order to live. Most individuals do this slowly. When pressure is applied, discomfort increases, and gradually, they begin to trade portions of themselves in order to feel secure, accepted, and noticed. But you didn't. You try to change your identity in order to become someone else. Colder, less genuine, more pushy, and manipulative. Nevertheless, you refused to give in. The devil was not attempting to destroy you with apparent means. He was attempting to transform you into a version of yourself that God had never made. Every betrayal, loss, every destructive connection, everything was meant to make you doubt your essential identity. You may have concluded that being excellent leads you nowhere, that being loving weakens you, while being honest makes you a target. This is where most individuals flip. But you held on. You remained gentle in a harsh environment. Even when it was easy to lie, you stayed honest. You maintained your empathy in an environment that encourages indifference. You died because you refused to change form for survival. The devil does not necessarily intend to murder you. Sometimes he merely wants to change your identity so you forget about your calling. The test was whether you would surrender your divine essence for comfort, approval, or vengeance. But you didn't. You held firm in your beliefs, even if it meant giving up peace, chances, and people you cared about. This world likes to reward those who comply, but you were not supposed to blend in. You were supposed to stand out. And that is just what you did. Even if it seemed like you were losing, you really won the battle that most people are unaware they are waging, remaining faithful to who God created you. Even when it seemed to be harming you, your spiritual blueprint remained intact. That explains why the doors are going to open, not because you were flawless, but because you refused to be someone you weren't. In heaven's view, it is uncommon. That is power. That is evidence. Number 4, you were not tested for strength. You were checked for purity under pressure. The world applauds for strength. That's loud, assertive, and powerful. The sort that fights back, pulls people, reveals secrets, and exacts retribution. That's the type of strength that people admire down here. But heaven wasn't pleased with how hard you could fight back. Heaven was waiting to see whether you could remain clean while traveling through dirt. God already knew you of strength. That was not the question. The true test was whether you could remain soft without coming apart, clean without requiring credit, and loving without losing your edge. This was not about whether you could withstand the betrayal. It was a question of whether you would allow that betrayal change you. Nobody would have blamed you if you did. You had every motive to be cold, calculating, guarded, and selfish. You had every right to shut down and plan your return in the shadows. But it was precisely what the adversary intended. He didn't just wish to harm you. He intended to corrupt you. He wanted to remain in your soul, using suffering as an explanation. And each time you tried to harden your heart, you failed. You passed a level that many people fail. God didn't want to see how much you could handle. He was curious to see what you would become once everything had twisted you. That is what separated you. You weren't just strong. You were polished. While the pressure was on you to become poisonous, you decided to remain holy. That's the kind of strength that doesn't appear on Instagram. That is the strength that is peaceful, unseen, and felt in paradise. You were never evaluated for performance, just for purity. Could you go through fire without getting a burned heart? Could you let them lay on you while still praying for them? Could you let God do the vindicating while remaining quiet and clean? You did. That triggered a response from the sky. Not only did you persevere, but you were completely present while doing so. That type of power opens doors that no human can close. Not noisy electricity, but clean power. Not retribution, but restraint. And you survived with just bruises and a sparkling spirit. Number 5. This was a higher-level surveillance test. A multidimensional witness check. Most individuals think their grief is private, that their difficulties are solitary, unnoticed, and unimportant to anything beyond this world. But the reality is, when you are selected, your life is chronicled not just on Earth, but also in worlds you cannot see. You weren't just going through difficulties. You were under heavenly monitoring, not in a scary sense, but in a spiritual appraisal that went far beyond human perception. Your responses under pressure were more than simply character development moments. They were observed by spiritual authorities, celestial observers, and entities in charge of weighing your soul. This was more than simply a test of willpower. It was an assessment of your multifaceted believability. Can you be trusted with power that transcends dimensions? Can you have supernatural power without being corrupted for selfish gain? The way you handled betrayal, maltreatment, and injustice. They were all being recorded in a spiritual record, not because God was waiting to punish you for failing, but because heaven was assessing your fitness to access things that most people would never think exist. And, in case you weren't aware, your honesty is your ticket to the supernatural. You weren't being tested on how quickly you could recover or how many times you prayed. The actual test was whether your heart posture stayed pure despite the fact that your life was a disaster. Whether you still valued truth when falsehoods would have prevailed sooner. Whether you remained grounded while the world attempted to stir your ego. You were being monitored not to catch you sliding, but to affirm. Can this soul manage elevation without ego, power, corruption, or influence, and without losing its divine identity? That's why your suffering seemed strangely heavy, as if it meant more than you thought. Because it did. You were being judged based on heavenly standards, not merely for worldly advancement, but also for duties and spiritual aspects. Some of the favors that will come are not even for this earth. It grants access to worlds, missions, insights, and duties that need you to have gone through fire without turning into smoke. You died, and heaven has the evidence. Number 6. Your allegiance was enticed by phony benefits. Most people believe that temptation only comes in the shape of blatant evil. Something sinister, harmful, or scandalous. However, after you are picked, the opponent becomes more subtle. He begins by delivering what seems to be excellent rather than what is really good. Finally, the actual exam. It's not always necessary to endure suffering. Sometimes it's about avoiding pleasure. You were given counterfeit blessings, which seem to be open doors, breakthroughs, or answered prayers. However, they were not sent to construct you. They were intended to trap you. That seemingly ideal relationship began to drive you away from your principles. That money-making promotion that requires you to downplay your abilities. That unexpected opportunity that forced you to ignore your instincts and just go with it. All of it was bait. The scariest aspect was that it seemed to be legitimate. You'd have had every reason to accept it. People around you applauded it. They responded, "This is your opportunity." But deep down, you felt something was wrong. You knew it didn't fit with who you were. Most significantly, who God has called you to be. This was the kind of exam that didn't resemble a test at all. It appears like a favor. It smells like fate. But something seems amiss in your soul. And while others chased the flash, calling it faith, you stayed still. You let it pass. You chose essence above publicity. You're making a call over the cloud. And that's unusual. The test was not whether you could say no to evil. The test was whether you could say no to what seemed to be a benefit but was not grounded in divine timing or truth. That is what separated you. You did not sell out merely to get things moving. You did not change your identity to fit into rooms that did not match your assignment. You trusted God's process above the world's acclaim. That was the actual test. And because you refused to accept the bait and walked away from what seemed to be a fantastic opportunity, but it wasn't God, you are about to get something that no counterfeit could possibly mimic. Genuine favor, divine alignment, an ascension that does not cost your soul. Number 7. Your tears were gathered as a test result. Suffering was the ink, and your tears were more than simply emotional outbursts. They were sacred data. Every breakdown you had behind closed doors. Every night, you kept it together long enough to fall in quiet. Once, no one was watching. Those were not forgotten in the unseen world. They were gathered not as flaws, but as evidence. Heaven does not grade on words or looks. It is associated with suffering. Not only did you suffer, but you suffered in a particular way. See, there are certain things you don't know how to speak aloud. Pain with no vocabulary. Wounds that did not bleed on the surface, but left scars on your identity. You couldn't describe what you were going through to anybody since you didn't understand why it hurt so much or made you feel so empty, despite doing everything correctly. But heaven understood. Your tears communicated everything. Every drop represented a declaration, testimony, or confession. When your voice ran out of words, your soul spoke out. God did not need a notebook or prayers written in flawless grammar. He understood the language of your pain. He saw the evenings when your strength faded, but you kept whispering. God just informed me that He witnessed you break down in the midst of attempting to be loyal, rather than dismissing you for being human. He filmed it not to humiliate you, but to affirm you. The world only appreciates power. That was rather loud, but heaven rewards grief that remains pure. Your tears reflected on life. They spoke the truth about how unjust things were. They stated the truth about how much you loved and yet got rejected. They revealed the truth about how hard you struggled to keep it together while everything was coming apart. That anguish signed your soul's name on the exam, which you passed. Not by pretending it didn't hurt, but by refusing to be bitter. The ink caused me pain. Heaven and the essay were written by your heart. It was evaluated according to the purity that remained after the pressure. You didn't just survive. You sobbed your way to a promotion. These were not simply tears. They represented divine proof. Number 8. You were a mirror set amid devils to show their real nature. You were not insane. You were not overreacting. And, no, you did nothing wrong to deserve the treatment you received. You were put among them not to blend in, but to make them visible. Your brightness, purity, and truth. Everything served as a mirror. God did not place you there to fit in or repair them. He positioned you there to reveal what was already hidden under their surface. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of your trip. You did not provoke the brutality. Your presence triggered it. Not because you were poisonous, but because the truth in you made them uncomfortable with their falsehoods. Some folks were kind before you came up. Some people supported you till you achieved. Others seemed loyal, until you kept your bounds. That change, that flip up, that was not about your failure. That was about their being disclosed. You unleashed the monsters they believed they had under control. You didn't have to say anything. Your energy, elegance, unwillingness to gossip, and inner serenity in the midst of upheaval. It inflamed what remained unhealed and corrupted in them. And when they snapped, planned, lied, or were frigid, you questioned yourself. You inquired what went wrong. But what you really accomplished was pass a quiet spiritual exam. You stood in truth without imitating their disorder. You allow their darkness to appear without allowing it into your own. God did not want you to fight them. He wanted you to remain cool, clear, and unshaken. You were a mirror, not a sponge. You did not internalize their actions. You just mirrored what was there all along. And the reflection, that is what made people despise you without reason. Love you. 1 minute. The next time I see you, I'll be angry. It was not personal. It was spiritual exposure. You failed because you did not accept the responsibilities that they attempted to assign to you. Villain, menace, and enemy. You didn't sink or transform into the monster they wanted you to be to excuse their behavior. You remained faithful. And by doing so, You unveiled their masks without having to pull them off. That is high-level spiritual warfare. Winning without hitting, exposing, retaliating, disclosing, or speaking. Number 9. You were spiritually starving to test whether you'd give up your soul for a crumb. You felt it. The gnawing emptiness, the quiet while everyone else seemed to have a place at the table. But you didn't. The seclusion was not accidental. It was a heavenly pressure test to determine whether you were willing to give up your soul for a crumb of acceptance. The world often delivers leftovers masquerading as belonging, a poisonous combination of false praise, conditional affection, and superficial ties. Many settle for these crumbs because loneliness is more painful than pride. But you did not. Being ignored and isolated might seem like a gradual famine, not only in the body, but also in the soul. It challenges your willingness to sacrifice your integrity for a seat that does not reflect who you actually are. Many people cave. They reduce their standards, hide their reality, or play roles that don't suit in order to be noticed or respected. But you were hungry in every way. You were famished for genuine connection, purpose, and love. It's not simply an illusion. Heaven was observing how you dealt with hunger. Would you swallow your resentment and pretend that everything was fine? Would you cling on to poisonous individuals just because they provided momentary inclusion? Or would you hold out knowing that the crumbs were insufficient to justify selling your soul for refusing to settle? Was your spiritual fast purifying your soul of everything that was not intended for you? This was not about punishment. It was a preparation. You were prepared to sit at a table where the food was nutritious. The business is authentic, and the throne is properly yours. That hunger was not a curse, but rather a test of your ability to wait for what is aligned with your divine destiny. And since you did not sell out for fake acceptance, but instead starved with dignity and patience, you demonstrated that you are more than simply ready to be served. You're ready to claim your throne. The main feast is approaching. You will never have to settle for crumbs again. Number 10. God permitted you to be misunderstood in order to test your willingness to correct others or trust Him. Misunderstanding is one of the most isolating experiences you can have. You strive to explain, clarify, and repair what is damaged and how others see you. Regardless of what you say, the story remains skewed. It seems like you're yelling into a vacuum as everyone around you nods to a fictitious version of yourself. Most individuals worry and hurry to clear their reputation, seeking approval and acceptance. But God's test was not about cleansing your name. It was about what happens when the world gets your narrative incorrectly. God permitted you to be misrepresented not as a punishment, but as a holy mandate. It was never about proving yourself to others. It was about trusting God to protect you. Would you spend your time correcting everyone else's portrayal of you? Or would you give up battling for their understanding and instead concentrate on your own development and advancement? Would you cling to the demand for quick justice? Or would you give up control and wait for the perfect time and place for the truth to emerge? You passed this exam because you took the more difficult, quieter road, trusting God's timetable above your own. You stopped explaining yourself to those who weren't ready to listen and instead focused your attention on becoming the person only God could recognize. You understand that truth does not need PR efforts or social media outbursts. It requires patience and confidence. Sometimes the loudest voice is quiet, not because you are beaten, but because you understand that the truth does not need your defense. It needs its time. God's plan isn't about quick gratification. It is about spiritual upliftment. When the moment is ripe, the truth will emerge with force that no argument or explanation could ever achieve. You placed your confidence in that procedure. You gave up the urge to be understood in human terms. In doing so, you passed a test that few can manage. You did not just survive misunderstanding, you overcame it. And that is why doors are going to open for you that no amount of explanation can ever open. A number. Your delays were a lie detector test for faith. Believing God while everything goes quickly is simple, but believing Him when doors remain closed and those you rely on vanish. That is the true difficulty. You said you had faith, but religion is more than just words. It's what you do when hope fades and life seems unjust. The delay you encountered was neither a mistake nor a penalty. It was a high-stakes spiritual lie detector exam for your religion. When people around you saw no development, many people quit up when opponents seemed to be gaining ground quicker. It would have been reasonable to wonder whether God had forgotten you. When wonderful individuals left away, it may have broken your spirit or made you lose hope. But you kept going. You continued turning up not because you saw the finish line, but because you believed the person who promised it. Even when everything seemed to be going wrong, the extended hush and waiting time were God's method of testing, whether your confidence was real or just convenient. True trust is unseen while waiting. It does not clamor for answers or explanations. It pushes onward in the dark, step by step, believing that the light will eventually appear, even if it takes years. You passed because you refused to sacrifice your faith for easy solutions or diversions. You didn't rush after every fresh chance or give up your authority in despair. You maintained a calm assurance that what had been postponed was not denied. That level of trust is unusual. It's the sort that fosters character, resilience, and spiritual development. Your delay was not a setback. It was a lie detector for the soul. And you didn't just pass. You moved forth in the dark, demonstrating that your faith is unwavering. As a result, life-changing opportunities are not automatically available to you. They are swinging wide, signaling the coming of someone who has been tried and shown to be really loyal. A number. You were the only live witness amid a graveyard of shattered souls. You've been surrounded by the debris of broken dreams, shattered hopes, and souls that are beyond repair. Many people around you died as a result of the storms. They gave up, turned bitter, or became the source of their sorrow. But you stood your ground. You stayed human, when everything within shouted to become cold or hard. That's why you're a live witness in a cemetery of shattered souls. The weight you carried was heavier than anyone could fathom. You didn't just survive. You survived with your soul intact. It was not luck that you remained complete while others fell apart. It was an indication of something deeper. You were never weak, even when it seemed like you were barely hanging on. You were unique in that you refused to let darkness alter your tale. This is the true miracle. Your capacity to recover after each collapse. To keep the heart open when treachery was consistent. To choose kindness when bitterness was the easiest option. That resilience is not taught in textbooks or distributed at conferences. It is made in the flames of anguish, in the quiet conflicts conducted far from the world's sight. Darkness hates you because you survived what it imagined would devour you. You are a living contradiction to everything that attempted to bury you in a world filled with shattered souls. You are evidence that surviving does not imply losing oneself. It entails rising above with your humanity, shining through whole and undamaged. You passed because you are unusual, one of the few who not only survived, but also became the calm amid the storm. That is why doors are opening for you now, since you have already passed through death and emerged unscathed. You're ready to live completely unrestricted, unapologetic, and unstoppable. A number. They gave you nothing. And yet, you made something. You began with an empty plate. No freebies, no cheerleaders, and no safety nets. The world treated you as if you were nothing. There's no spotlight, no favors, and no easy pathways. Most individuals succumb to the pressure. They are waiting for external affirmation in order to think they are valuable. But you did not wait. You weren't expecting a procession or an invitation to stand. You constructed your own route, opportunity, and momentum out of thin air. That is the true test God has laid before you. Can you find strength when everything is taken away? Could you build while others questioned you? Could you develop without applause? The response was yes. You not only survived scarcity, but flourished in it. That is why you passed. You learned how to convert empty into fuel, how to mine gold from dust. This kind of growth does not depend on chance or time. It's raw, gritty resourcefulness. It entails tapping into something inside oneself that is so strong that it requires no external confirmation. You developed your own source of electricity. You did not allow a lack of support make you tiny or resentful. Instead, you utilized it as a furnace to hone your soul and purpose. Because of this, God knew you wouldn't become entitled when benefits arrived. You wouldn't expect to be given stuff or feel indebted by the world. Instead, you would embrace empowerment, the type that comes with creating, earning, and advancing on your own terms. That is the mark of the genuine, selected ones. They build something from nothing, not because it's simple, but because it's essential. You passed because you developed self-reliance while immersed in faith. You show that even when the world offers you nothing, you are unstoppable. That is a power that cannot be taken away, and a sign that life-changing doors are about to open wide. A number. The doors will now open since you are no longer anxious to enter. You've been pursuing doors for so long, begging, demonstrating, straining yourself thin in order to get in. But desperation is a trap. It blurs judgment, diminishes presence, and communicates to the world that you are accepting less than you deserve. You didn't know that the exam wasn't about how hard you pursued the doors. It was about whether you could quit pursuing altogether. When you stopped asking and proving, something changed. You progressed from a state of lack to one of merit. You passed not by battling harder, but by taking a step back and believing that whatever is intended for you would come without your pleading or desperation. You stopped attempting to force yourself into areas that were not yours and instead concentrated on being the person who had the ability to easily open such spaces. The universe realizes that you are no longer willing to cheapen what is beyond those doors. Therefore, they will now open on their own time. You did not just endure difficulties. You matured into someone capable of handling the responsibilities that come with true opportunity. Doors do not open for just anybody. They open for individuals who are willing to respect what is on the other side, untainted by desperation or compromise. You become the key not by forcing the lock, but by growing into something important, trustworthy, and aligned. Your very presence now demands respect and invites opportunities. This is not a matter of chance or coincidence. It is about change. The urgency has faded, replaced with a peaceful certainty that says, if it's for me, it will happen. If not, I don't need it. That shift alters everything. It transforms waiting into getting. It converts shortage into plenty. You did not simply pass the exam. You become the door opener, the gatekeeper to your own destiny. And now those life-changing doors will not just open. They'll fly wide, beckoning you to the next chapter with strength and elegance. You have gone through a challenge unlike any other. A hidden exam created by God to test much more than your strength or patience. It was a test of your soul's purity, your capacity to remain steady when the world misinterpreted you, when quiet was your only option, and the doors you prayed for remained resolutely shut. However, you did not just endure these times. You surpassed them. You demonstrate that true faith is not a spectacular performance. It is the calm, unwavering faith that endures even in the darkest nights and the most lonely valleys. Every tear you cried, every betrayal you faced, and every minute you felt famished and alone was documented not just on earth, but also in the higher realms, where your integrity was noticed and cherished. You refused to accept phony blessings or crumbs. Instead, you remained committed to your mission and refused to allow sadness or resentment rewrite your tale. That fortitude, that unwillingness to compromise your essence, is why the powers who attempted to bury you now dread the light you bear. You become a living testament for the broken, a beacon for those who lost their path when they encountered the same challenges you did and gave up. And in the stillness of your waiting, when the world saw just delay, God was monitoring your faith with a supernatural lie detector. Your patience was not a weakness. It was power, a force that transformed you into someone who refuses to settle for anything less than the fullest of their potential. Now the change is finished. You're no longer yearning for doors to open. You have become the key. The mighty are ready. The doors will swing wide open, not because you pursue them with empty hands, but because you have developed an attitude that compels respect and welcomes heavenly opportunity. You didn't just pass an exam. You have become a new creation, prepared for life-changing breakthroughs and the destiny that awaits you. Stand tall and confidently stride ahead. The rest of the world may have questioned you, but the person who matters most has never done so. This is your moment. The door is open, the road is clear, and your life is about to change in ways you never expected. You are God selected, tried, and proved. The most important chapters of your novel are now ready for writing. If this message struck a chord with you, if you sense the force of these truths awakening something deep inside, do not keep it to yourself. Hit it. Click the subscribe button to join this community of awakened souls seeking to rise above, break through, and claim their divine destiny. Like this video to demonstrate that you are powerful. Comment below with your own breakthrough tales or questions. Let's start a discourse that inspires and empowers. And forward this message to someone who needs to hear it right now. Together, we are doing more than simply surviving. We are changing, developing, and becoming unstoppable. This is your path. Let us move courageously together. Stay blessed.